Добрый день, Major. Rad vidēt. Our French intelligence confirms the Allied forces are developing two vehicle weapons, the phased transport and the chrono tank. It is not in the Soviet interest that either of these weapons becomes operational. Do what you must. Steal the prototypes. Use the prototypes against the Allies. And keep them from using that chrono tank. Iditai, go on.
Welcome back, Commander. We're in the final stretch of videos for Red Alert. This being obviously the finalization of the Soviet missions.
Construction complete. Construction options. Building.
For a first-time player, this mission will probably... it'll take some tries to get used to. Unfortunately, we're saddled with the common, or more common than probably necessary, lack of credits, which means that, expanding and building up your forces is tough initially. The briefing also mentioned that there's a whole bunch of natural ridge lines and such, which don't really help, you as the player when your base is at the lower portion of them.
Construction options. Building. Construction complete.
Granted, it can help out in some instances, like how we've seen time and time again that a structure that's like multiple grids, or what do they call them? Anyways, when they're multiple high and yet only one tile, or basically when the sprite and the tile don't match, you can get a little bit of extra distance looking up north. But that aside, there's not too much of a benefit. That being said, it will help out if we ever get the Tesla coils. If we get Tesla coils. That's sort of another thing I don't think I've really ever touched on, and isn't always very obvious for the player. That being tech levels. Especially when, if we go way back, after the campaign, but the first missions of Counter-Strike for the Allies, you're limited in tech, but nothing tells you that. You kind of just have to build up your base and then figure out what you have available to you.
On hold.
Yes, sir.
Granted, I don't really know a fix for that. Like, how would you even display that to the player? I guess you could always put it in the briefing itself. It's not like those would take up much space.
On hold. Cancel.
But it certainly is one of those things that comes to mind. Because, well, let's face it, if you're limited to light tanks and grenadiers, or rocket soldiers and, Humvees, it'd be nice if you knew that beforehand. It probably wouldn't come up too often, but for the sake of argument, if you, say, had access to very little in terms of good vehicles, it would kind of make more sense to just go with infantry.
Building. On hold. Cancel.
Yeah, the Tesla coil probably wasn't my finest purchase and production ever. I'm making it sporting for the Humvee. That's my excuse anyways. I don't quite know why both trucks just stopped. Like, if I told them to not put any funds in, then that seems
Construction complete.
odd. Maybe I was worried
Building.
that I'd go over the limit.
Affirmative.
I know we have gems, and you don't want to overload your refinery because then you just lose the money.
Complete. Building.
Yes, sir. Reporting.
So there was most likely a bug.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yeah. I don't know what causes that, to be honest.
Building.
I think it might come up once more in the rest of the videos,
On hold.
but it's a strange bug, to say the least. I'm pretty sure we've already seen it once before, too.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Waiting order.
Base is under attack.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Comrade, acknowledged.
As we've already seen with the Allied campaign, when it comes to Aftermath, we've already seen that there's quite a few additions to the Allied roster. And throughout the missions, we've also noticed that there's a few additions to the Soviets as well. The Tesla tank is back, although now it's an actual, I don't want to say official, because obviously it existed prior to Aftermath, but it has its own sprite, and basically it actually looks like its own individual unit. The Shock Trooper follows the similar line of thinking. It's infantry, can't be crushed, and shoots lightning. Honestly, what's not to like?
Cannot deploy here. Reconstruction options. Building.
Waiting acknowledged.
Building.
Yes, sir. Waiting order.
On hold. Cancel.
I should probably build a second refinery at some point.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building.
Yes, acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Comrade, acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
You know, I've been doing some stuff to basically prep for future releases.
Yes, affirmative.
And it's kind of surprising just how slow Red Alert is in comparison. And Red Alert is supposed to be like the sped up version of Tiberium Dawn. So, all in all, it's kind of a neat way to see how strategy games, real time strategy games, anyways, have progressed.
Wait, acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Building.
Waiting. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Our base is under attack.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
For now, this isn't really a mission that you can kind of just speed your way through. Probably a reason why you don't really see any speedruns of Red Alert or Tiberium Dawn.
Waiting order.
Not saying they don't exist, but more or less just that they're harder to find. Or fewer in number, whichever.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Building. Building.
The fact that the AI also gets chrono tanks, especially as the first mission of the Aftermath campaign, I guess if you want to call it, which I guess technically it was for the PlayStation,
Reconstruction.
with how things progressed, it just makes it very dangerous to ever move out without some sort of defenses in place.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative.
The fact that at any moment you could have a chrono tank move in and
Construction.
just destroy a good portion of your base is actually quite terrifying.
Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Waiting. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
It certainly doesn't help that chrono tanks have a lot of damage output when it comes to buildings.
Acknowledged. Yes, acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Wait, acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Reporting. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building.
Reporting.
Construction complete. Cannot deploy here.
You're also very limited on just how much space you have to build. The fact that there's still that restriction on how far away you can build anything, and the fact that there are ridges everywhere, really makes it so it's while your base is condensed, it's also hard to defend it because, well, you're wider than you are taller.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Building.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Comrade. Affirmative. Comrade.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Construction
Yes,
options.
sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Building. Preparing.
Awaiting orders. Yes, sir.
Did you notice I don't have the spy plane? It's another nasty trick that the game sometimes just plays on you. Just takes away certain powers you're kind of just used to having.
Yes, sir.
Prepare.
Yes, sir. Reporting.
Insufficient funds.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Prepare. Insufficient funds. Prepare.
Yes, sir.
I'll have to try and remember to check the different values
Prepare.
with regards to the Tesla tank. It'd be interesting to see if and what would be any changes to it, going from the Counter-Strike version to the Aftermath version.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Reporting.
As before, it has a very long range attached to it. It's very deceiving.
Insufficient.
You wouldn't expect something like the Tesla tank to shoot out at a distance, I would say, similar to artillery.
Prepare.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit prepared.
Vehicle report. Affirmative.
Sadly, it still retains its glass cannon status, so don't ever expect to have it survive many fights.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
And kind of makes your service depot a necessary purchase.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Sadly, the unit movement still has some issues with taking orders quickly.
Affirmative.
Building. Construction options. Unit
Yes,
ready.
sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Awaiting
Our
orders.
base is under
Acknowledged.
attack.
Comrade. Acknowledged.
I'm not quite sure what exactly the timer is on those things.
Affirmative.
It seems like maybe every 4 or so minutes after an initial time.
Building. Insufficient funds.
Reporting. Yes, sir. Awaiting orders.
I'm not quite sure why the AI didn't react to that. You would think that they would move in to attack whatever's attacking them.
Reporting.
It's some weird,
Affirmative.
I don't want to say like property or anything. It's just, I don't know. The AI just fails to retaliate sometimes.
Cancel. Building.
I imagine maybe it's because the submarine is out of view, so the AI just gets confused and does nothing as a result. But I don't feel like that's 100% the answer.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Comrade. Affirmative. Affirmative. Wait. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Building.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Yes, acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, affirmative.
Building. Unit
Affirmative.
lost.
Acknowledged.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Waiting order. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit ready. Unit lost.
Yes,
Unit
reporting.
lost. Unit
Acknowledged.
ready.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Awaiting.
Unit lost. Select target.
Nothing.
Reinforcements
Acknowledged. Yes,
online.
acknowledged.
Construction complete. Unit lost. Unit lost.
Reporting.
Unit
Ready,
lost.
agreed. Affirmative. Waiting for affirmative. Ready, yes, sir. Ready and wait. Affirmative.
Lost.
Report affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
So the AI seems to be a little loaded for this mission.
Yes, sir. Agreed.
Kind of begs the question why they even bother having ore trucks anyways.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Building. Silos needed. Unit lost. Building. Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Select target.
Well, guess those parabombs aren't making it.
Building. Unit lost.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't help that Chrono tanks can actually shoot aircraft. So the AI is really good at just kind of like instantly pausing and attacking something.
Waiting for affirmative.
At least I don't remember Chrono tanks being able to fire on the move like that.
Yes, sir. Reporting. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
On hold.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Reporting. Reporting. Affirmative.
Construction complete.
It'd be nice if everything didn't cost so damn much.
Primary building selected.
Yes, sir.
I know I got at least one warning for silos being needed, but
Reporting.
the map kind of quickly dries up when it comes to income.
Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Waiting order. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
At the same time, though, it's also a fact of having or purchasing very expensive units.
Waiting orders.
Because, let's face it, heavy tanks aren't cheap, Tesla tanks certainly aren't cheap, and, well, missile subs. Well, we'll get to missile subs.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Vehicle affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Awaiting
Base is
orders.
under
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes,
Unit
sir.
ready.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Reporting.
Select target. Reinforcements have arrived.
You know, sometimes I just pick the best spots to drop infantry.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Insufficient funds.
Yes, sir. Waiting affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Ready.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Building.
Waiting order. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Awaiting orders. Awaiting orders.
So obviously the quote-unquote right way to attack any sort of base is you want to effectively kill any income that they could get. At least that's step one. If they can't make it out of their base, then you worry about getting through their defenses. Sadly, there's no real quick way to do it in this mission. I guess maybe if I flooded like the entire map with shock troopers, that might help. Because of the fact that they're pretty resistant to damage. And they do a good chunk in return. And that's the power of the missile sub. Sadly, I don't think there's any sort of relation between the missile sub and the advanced tactical sub. They just happen to both be sub-units. Like, I don't think there was ever any sort of link between the two, in the sense that, you know, they came up maybe with the ATS and then wanted to build something similar, but maybe not so overpowered. Or, I guess at the same time, something that actually would be useful. Because, let's face it, a sub that shoots nukes is nice and all, but it's kind of just in that gimmick category. It's hard to find uses for something that, unless used like 100% properly, will just end up in you murdering yourself. The missile sub, on the other hand, poses basically a constant risk against the allied player. You know, submarines are nice and all. You can sort of expect that they'll be around on the map somewhere, doing something. Maybe. But with the missile sub, you've basically opened up any water portion, regardless of if you think someone could build on it or not. As long as you can fit a shipping yard or a sub pen, you can easily just, you know, swamp an area with something that is invisible 99% of the time and can wipe out quite a bit really easily. Also, we're seeing the return of the all hunt mechanic, which is strange. I didn't expect this mission to be the sort of one that does it. It also ends up being pretty crazy because, well, whenever you sell stuff, you get a bunch of units. And I'm kind of getting Zerg rushed here. I've at least got some form of defenses. But this is the sort of thing that happens because, you know, you do something like destroy the construction yard that you didn't think you blew up. It's also interesting that these boats knew exactly where my subs were. They kind of just made a straight beeline to them. Well, as straight as you can be on coastlines. You gotta feel bad for any enemy AI, like infantry, that I don't envy anybody who has to run down towards 3 Tesla coils. And, of course, because we killed all the ground units, and I lost all my subs in a rather embarrassing fashion. Well, we gotta wait for water units to make the rounds.
Unit ready.
On the plus side, though, at least I get to look at the map and see how everything,
Cancelled.
at least in a basic sense, looked for us. It's probably expected to go missile subs, just because the defenses at the front are rather strong. There's quite a few turrets around. Obviously, there's always going to be some pillboxes here and there. But also the fact that there's just so much in the way of shroud generation with gap generators. And, you know, them having their own private little income field. And so many god-awful silos.
Insufficient funds.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Mission accomplished.